previous meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible. After this meeting, we'll be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Committee members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Climate Action Committee may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right. Carrie, can you go ahead and do a roll call, please? Or is John doing that today?
I'm actually handing over to John. I have a few items I need to take care of. So he's going to be facilitating for me, and I'm going to duck out in a few minutes.
All right, I will start the roll call. Gerald Glazer.
That'd be me.
Alex Goodman. I believe he's here.
Alex?
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry, guys. Thank you.
Dina Allen. She's here. Joshua Somine.
Somebody, yes, here. Thank you.
Kenan Lee.
Here.
Lisa Pierce, I believe, was going to be absent. Deborah Burns.
Here.
Sonali Sikan.
Howdy doody dandy.
Woody Hastings.
Here.
Jasenia Garcia. Diana Rich.
She's going to be a few minutes late.
Okay, thank you. Kathy Odinger.
Here.
And Sarah Gurney.
Hi, John. Here I am.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, and Deborah is going to be providing our inspiration today.
Okay, so this will be very short and simple. This was inspiring to me because this person inspires me, but also because I felt like it speaks to what we do as a group. So the quote is, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Alice Walker. And I felt like that was very appropriate for the Climate Action Committee, because one thing I often hear is there's nothing I can do, it won't make a difference. You know, we're all here where we're at. So I thought that was a good thing to remember while we're all here working towards change.
Thank you so much. All right, Joshua, do you have a review of action items from last meeting?
Sure, they were just mostly reminders and kind of research homework for folks. First was a reminder that the local hazard mitigation plan is posted, and Carrie is interested in feedback from us. So if you want to do the research on that. The research working group was finalizing the website resources listing. So hopefully folks have sent in any further things they would like listed on the website. Further questions on bird micromobility are being handled through Woody today. And the outline drafting of the climate action framework is being handled by Phoebe today. And then a further reminder that we'll be presenting the quarterly recap to the City Council in early December, on which we will discuss more further on later on in this meeting. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. And that reminds me that Carrie did give a printed copy of the hazard mitigation plan draft to the library for the reference section. If anybody like me has trouble reading that long of a document in solely online format, but the library let me bring it home. So it's at my house. So if you want it, you can contact me and I'll let you know when I'm done with it, and we'll drop it back at the library. It shouldn't take me more than a couple more days to get through it. But that was nice of them, I thought. So do we have any comments from the public today regarding items not on the agenda? And hearing none, we'll move on. Does anyone have a statement of conflict of interest regarding any of today's agenda items? All right. Planning Department report. Is that going to be John or Carrie today?
John, do you want to start off with anything?
I don't have a whole lot other than we're working on the housing element update. So there's some surveys going around as far as they relate to housing needs and whatnot for the city of Sebastopol. There's a flyer that's posted outside of City Hall on the bulletin board, as well as within the library that has a QR code and it has links to the survey. So if you guys would like to take those, that would be great to give us some feedback on what kind of housing needs are relevant to the city of Sebastopol. And it's also it's on the city's website under the housing element tab in the planning department section.
Great. Anything else from Planning Department?
I'll just note a couple of things that might be of interest to this group. Yes, so we have the local hazard plan is out there. And thank you, Kenneth, for just coordinating with folks on this group who might be interested in that. Additionally, our planning commission last night passed a couple of resolutions forwarding a project that might be of interest to you to City Council for approval. It'll probably be going to them the January 4th City Council meeting. But the project is an all-electric mini townhome project. So it's 10 less than 600 square foot dwelling units. So looking at small homes, not bigger homes. And it's by Helping Buildings as the applicant. And so they are looking to do a number of sustainable design elements in their project, but it would be all electric with solar. So I know Tor and some of those from the energy group may be interested in that kind of a project.
Very small homes.
Very small homes. And yeah, their market, they said, is either, younger folks trying to get into housing in Sebastopol or people wanting to downsize. For the units will be universally designed, ADA adaptable. So that's also certainly a good aging in place mechanism. And I think that is about it for me. Is there anything from City Council, Sarah?
Well, can I ask a question of Carrie? Is that all right? It sounds like a reiteration of Huntley Square, or is it something
It is
different?
Huntley Square.
Okay.
It is
All right.
Huntley Square.
Just
They're,
checking.
coming forward for final approval.
Thank
process.
you.
Yep.
Good to hear. So let me give a report from the City Council. I wish Diana was here because she has an important part of this. She may not be in on time. The council looked at our budget process, hoping to improve that. We have an issue that we couldn't get a consultant to look at our way of doing municipal services financially from City Hall. We're still working on that. The city manager gave a report on the sweep of the campground in the Laguna. That's got a lot of detail in it. We also talked about the status of the 20 items that the council discussed at the end of July, called council initiatives, and noted significant progress on many of them, including Tanya, our hiring of Phoebe, who is here too, our Civic Spark Fellow. We went on to talk about the recommendations from the Committee for the Unhoused, and this relates to a potential RV park behind Wishman Hall. That item is returning to the council, I believe, for a special meeting November 30th. That's what Diana, as a council member, and Mary Una Glass have been working on in great detail. We're looking ahead to that meeting as well. I don't know, Madam Chair, if Tanya has the opportunity to report in this meeting. because I did want to mention the Urban Land Institute report, which Tanya gave a very detailed and very professional report on at the RCPA meeting. There are 40 recommendations in there that relate to wildfire resilience, related directly to climate change, with a focus on land use and wildfire resilience, energy and economy resilience, as well as equitable governance and financing. It's a very significant report that has a lot of material in it. So let me just leave it at that, and we'll see how things go in this meeting if we get to any other discussion of anything from the council.
Yeah, I would personally love to hear that report from Tanya, but we do have a pretty full agenda today. And so if Tanya, if you're willing to come back to a future meeting to
Absolutely.
that would be,
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
And I put the link to the report in the chat. So
thank you.
It's another long document, Ken. Another really long document, but very professional and very interesting for our future. I just can't let go of this without saying one of the major concepts in the report was that as a county, we have much more power, meaning ability to have accomplishments related to climate change, especially if we were to embrace the concept of one Sonoma, as opposed to all these 9 little jurisdictions in the county and the little hamlets in the small villages, all of that, one Sonoma County. Thank you.
All right. Carrie is turned into a photograph, which I think means she left. I realized that before she left, I wanted to make sure that, John, are you able to advise us about the items that are going to be coming up in the chair reports about holiday rescheduling?
I am actually still here, so I'm just making sure John's coordinated before I sign off. But if we're able to talk about that now,
maybe we should just bump that up while you're here, so that we're making sure that we're clear about what the city's request and advice would be about rescheduling those meetings.
Sure.
So this is from a regular agenda item D. For the chair reports, we were going to discuss the upcoming holidays. So the second meeting in November and the second meeting in December are currently scheduled on city days that the city is having a holiday. So as a staffed committee, we are unable to meet at our regular time on those weeks. So our choices would be to just have one meeting this month and one meeting next month, which may work well with people and holidays, but I think maybe doesn't work that well with Phoebe's ambitious timeline for the work that we have asked her to do, as well as some of the momentum that is happening in some of the other working groups. So I think maybe it would just make sense to get a little straw poll of, how many of you would like us to cancel the second meeting for November and December? Can you just wave your hands? I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4. And how many people feel strongly that we should try to have those meetings rescheduled to other days? It's like Joshua is making a very complicated.
What does that mean, Joshua? You're going to have to unpack that one for us.
Sorry, it means I kind of agree. Like, I would suggest maybe canceling one and trying to fit another one in is kind of personally what I would go for. But so I'm doing 3 out of 4.
I would second what Josh is saying. That sounds better. Canceling one meeting and then, or like trying to reschedule at least.
Okay. That seems like a kind of nice halfway point. What do you, go ahead?
I was just going to say, I thought you needed to cancel both of those meetings because there won't be city staff to staff us. So 2 meetings need to be canceled and we'll reschedule 1 meeting in the place of 2. Is that the proposal?
I think that's the proposal. The meeting that's coming up next would be the day before Thanksgiving. But if we wanted to reschedule the December meeting, I don't know what our options would be, Carrie or John.
So that could also be the day before, although I believe there is a council meeting on that day. That's a December 21st. I don't know if it makes a difference, but John would be available for the November 23rd date. I would not. Both of us would be available on the 21st.
What
of
about December 20th?
That would also work with city staff.
Okay, just a
Would that
thought.
be better? So you're not trying to do a council meeting the same day?
Probably for the council members and probably for me as well. Yes.
Yes, I mean, too much Zoom in a row is really it's hard.
Yeah.
So do we have to have a motion and all these things for rescheduling meetings, or can we just kind of agree?
The chairs can just just coordinate with staff on that. So
Okay.
we don't need a motion or anything.
What time would it be on the 20th? What time, Kenna? Or
Same
Josh,
time slot, just 2 days earlier. I mean, what do people think about that? Is that feasible, given that it's still a month away?
It's a good idea. I have an overlap, but you all are, if you're good.
Okay, I think we're seeing general acquiescence to the plan. Sunali, did you have something you wanted to say? No, you put something in the chat and I will look at it very shortly. Okay, so let's try for, Joshua and I will work with staff to finalize the schedule with the tentative plan to be to cancel the second November meeting and then reschedule the second December meeting to the 20th instead of the 22nd. All right, and we'll send out an email announcing that officially when it becomes official at some point, hopefully soon. Okay. Sunali was saying, can we have a holiday gathering legally to satisfy one of those? And I think we can't have a holiday. My understanding is we can't have a holiday meeting. We can't have a holiday gathering that's a meeting, but we could have a holiday gathering outside of the meeting as long as we don't talk about anything climate related.
Correct.
So that would be kind of an offline, just social event.
Correct.
So if anyone wants to set that up, please. All right, moving back to our regular agenda to the first part, I'm going to hand the floor over to Woody, and my camera will go off briefly, but it will come back on shortly. Woody's going to talk about the further information that Bird Micromobility brought in response to our many excellent questions.
Thanks, Kenna. Yeah, and I sure wish I had some further information to share, the responses from the Bird folks. So just for anyone who's not up to speed on this, this is coming through the Transportation Committee. So Alex, chime in, or folks that have participated in the Transportation Subcommittee meetings, chime in if I miss anything. But we first heard from Bird in our September Transportation meeting. And we had a bunch of questions. Not all of them were answered, but we decided to go ahead even so and bring it to the full Climate Committee for a presentation from them. And that was at our October 27th meeting. We had a presentation and there were a whole bunch of great questions that everybody asked. And so the follow-up from that was going to be that we would have written responses from Robert Singleton, the representative from Bird, and Denny Rosati, who's helping them to reach out to communities here in Sonoma County. I got the most recent email I got from Denny was from last Wednesday, and he said they were still working on it. I just emailed him shortly before the meeting to say, hey, how's it going? still haven't gotten that. So I don't, unfortunately, have the responses for us today. So it'll have to wait for a future meeting to have that to chew on. I'm perfectly happy to continue the conversation. Anybody that wants to comment on it from our previous meetings on it. Alex or Zeno or Jerry, did I capture most of that?
Yep. Yeah, I have some more things to say, but I don't necessarily think they're relevant right now. I think it's better to just wait until we have the questions back and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I concur that it would be more useful to have conversation once we have more information, but it does occur to me, Sonali, is your hand up? Is your hand up? Okay. It did occur to me that if anyone had thought of more questions that they would like us to send to them to be included in those responses, that this could be an opportunity to ask those if things occurred to any of us after that meeting. I don't see anybody jumping in. Go ahead, Joshua.
Just one little question, Woody, and if you want to put it to the beer folks, or you can just forward context to me. I'm wondering if any of their vehicles have any degree of storage or carry capacity on them, just with the thought of the vehicles being used for errands or something on that order, or if they're strictly a stand on but don't carry things.
Oh, by storage, you mean, I was thinking energy storage. You mean sort of a cargo capacity?
Right.
Yes, exactly. Is there any way to carry a package on a scooter or a bike?
That would be a question for them. From what I've seen, and like when I've seen them around, other cities and whatnot, I have not noticed any that have, that are cargo bikes or cargo scooters. So my hunch would be nope, but that would really be something that they would have to answer. Maybe they've got something in the works, who knows?
Yeah. My experience has been there hasn't been any storage on scooters, and then on the bikes, it's usually a front basket. It's, a medium to small front basket.
Could you guys add that question into your ongoing communication with them?
We absolutely can. I will make sure that question gets in there. And I just, dropped for folks that may not have had a chance yet to poke around on their website, the Bird company's website. I just dropped it in the chat. And looks like I did a direct message somehow. Didn't mean to do that. Anyway, I'll drop it in the chat and I'll get that question in. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions that occurred to anyone else between then and now? All right. Well, then I guess that was quick and easy and gives you quite a lot of time, Phoebe, for however much discussion we'd like to have on the draft kind of initial outline for the climate action framework. And Phoebe, are you ready for kind of facilitating that discussion? Great.
Yes, thank you. So there was a draft outline for this climate action framework that went out in the agenda packet, and I will put that in the chat as well. And this is a document that I drafted from looking at other jurisdictions' climate action plans and seeing sort of what key elements were in those plans and things that the committee may want to consider including in Sebastopol's climate action framework. And I'll share my screen in a minute and go through that document. But before we get there, I want to sort of encourage the committee to think about what goals you all want the framework to achieve and what you hope the framework will accomplish, and then think about whether this draft outline sort of seems like it would meet those goals. So let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, but it's really small. If there's a way to zoom in, that would be great.
don't know why this always happens when I'm trying to share my screen. It's tiny. Is that any bigger?
Not significantly. Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So sort of basic elements, forward is typically included, acknowledgements. I wanted to call out here specifically a land acknowledgement because Sebastopol is on the traditional lands of the Southern Pomo people. And I am not sure if Sebastopol has already developed a land acknowledgement statement that could be included here, or if that's something the committee would consider developing. And then in the introduction, just explaining the problem and why Sebastopol is looking to develop a climate action framework, how the framework's going to be used, having a sort of vision and goal statement, and then a brief summary of how this document was developed, providing some basic background on the Climate Action Committee, the Sebastopol's past actions, and the regional and even statewide context for this framework. And then in the sort of, I called this strategies and initiatives, but I'm not sure if the committee wants to go as far as having them be actual strategies. Petaluma's framework, for example, just includes goals in each of their sections. So that's something to discuss. And there's a couple options I presented here. One is to match the sections of the framework with RCPA's Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy, which has equity and community engagement, decarbonization, carbon sequestration and ecosystem services, and resilience and adaptation. There's a similar version from San Antonio's Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which is just simplified into the categories of equity, mitigation, and adaptation. And then there's also the option to get a little more specific in those categories. Like, for example, Portland's Climate Action Plan, they have it categorized by sort of sector. So transportation sector, water sector, actions in each of those. And from my perspective, I think an option like A or B is sort of easier to communicate to the public. It's easier to say, so to focus on these larger categories, we're going to use less carbon-based fuels, we're going to take carbon out of the atmosphere, we're going to adapt to current warming climate, and we're going to do it by engaging the community rather than listing, here's what we're going to do in transportation, here's what we're going to do in energy, etc. Even though the committee may want to consider actions in all of those areas, my sort of recommendation is that it's easier to communicate if it's grouped into these larger categories. And then often these documents include a section on implementation or recommendations for implementation. And might want to include here how the framework is going to sort of integrate with the Sebastopol General Plan and other planning documents. And then in the appendices, just including more details on the process. So that is the draft outline in summary, and welcome your discussion and questions. And Jerry, I see you have your hand up.
First a question, then a couple of comments. Can you explain what a land acknowledgement is?
Oh, yes, sorry. So a land acknowledgement is just typically a couple sentences acknowledging the native peoples or the native stewards of the land. And yeah, usually just says something like, we acknowledge that this land was and continues to be of great importance to whatever group was traditionally the stewards of that land. And that's something the committee could consider developing and the process for developing as well.
The only one of those documents that I'm familiar with is the Portland CAP, because we used that as a model when we developed the climate action plan for the city of Sunnyvale.
Mhm.
and it got modified over time. It's very nice because it's so legible, and it puts things together. 3 years ago, I was working with the Climate Center on initiatives that might follow their CCA initiative. And one of the ones that was listed by that group at the time was to take the climate action plans and require them to be part of the general plan in the state of California. And that discussion is still going on. If you look at the general plan definition, there's a number of places where there's statements about climate that are required for the different sections. And I kind of like, I'm going to give you an opinion, I kind of like keeping that in mind, because if you do a general plan, you work with goals, then you have policies and you have actions that follow those. And that gives you a really good framework to work from for a city when you're trying to make decisions. And so of the option C, which you think is less legible, is the one I find most legible. And I like that framework.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but I do agree that from a sort of city planner perspective, it is maybe easier to categorize actions into those categories. I think there's still a way we could do both and sort of identify which actions fall into those categories while still communicating it in the larger categories. But yes, that's a good pro of that option. Thank you. Woody.
Thanks, and great job on this initial outline. Appreciate it. Appreciate the brevity too. So yes, climate justice line is super important, and I think maybe you're already aware of and have looked at the sort of equity principles or values. We have put together a matrix on that, and I'm pretty sure it touched on the land acknowledgement aspect and the degree to which local tribes need to be consulted. And just the only other comment I'll make on that is that there is a requirement for some projects to, a legal requirement to engage with tribes. And I don't know what the code section is, but off the top of my head, but if you wanted to look at that and if it's relevant, I don't know if it would apply in what we're putting together as a climate action framework, but it might be something to be at least aware of if you're not already. So there's that. Then just another thing that is on my mind is that, there's a lot of competing pressing matters that the city faces on any given day. And some of them relate to basic human needs of housing and transportation and, being able to food security, things like that. And I think the framework should acknowledge in some way, if it could, that, with the things we want to do on climate should be things that are climate smart, but that are not, it's hard to articulate this, not competing, certainly not competing with programs or public monies that are going to meet human needs. So if we're going to meet human needs, to try to do that in climate smart ways, maybe is a way to put it. And if that's helpful to further the framework, there's that. Then just for me, I have been spending my time working on mitigation for a long time. I'm not a huge fan of public dollars going into adaptation. I think that where adaptation or resilience makes sense for me is where it's for the most vulnerable among the population, and that adaptation for, mansions built right on the coastline or in a fire-prone area or whatever. I mean, my focus to date is mostly on mitigation. That's where I'm at, and that's what I'm more interested in, as opposed to acquiescing to, okay, yeah, we're done, we just need to adapt. Anyway, off my soapbox. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Woody. Sonali.
How's the volume?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you for putting this together. It's really, I feel like there's some momentum happening here, both with what Sarah Gurney offered earlier, the inspiration for the day, this piece, and I really appreciate you bringing in the land acknowledgement, even if just bringing our focus to that again. I think it's important for us to be aware of the history and be aware of the past so we can weave it into our future decisions. And I agree with Woody. I'll suds in favor of what he was sharing as far as acknowledging all the pieces, but how to convey it to the public, the strategy behind it will be key, but not losing sight of those as important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonali. Sarah.
Thank you. Just as a point of history, I'd like to mention quickly, the council honored the Pomo Indians with a full month-long every October for a number of years. October was Pomo Honoring Month, and there were activities by local people who took the plaza and celebrated with the community. The woman artist who helped organize those events passed away, and they've kind of fallen out of our practice. But it's an interesting historical piece for us to note. Phoebe, I think you know a whole lot more about all these documents that you're talking about. Jerry does too, more than me, but I want to speak from an individual council member because for me, from my perspective, it's really important to classify by categories. I think that's going to be more useful in this way. I would really like to install the climate action approach into each department of the city so that our daily decisions and actions and the work of city staff evidences the commitment. So it's right there in our minds and in our practice. Also, if this is community driven, then the work of the city on a daily basis and the decision makers will be in line with this plan. To me, that's really important that it be integrated in that way. Otherwise, we're writing a document that gets put on the shelf, right? And Phoebe, you are a resource right now. I want to make sure we have great success with you.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear about the Pomo Honoree Month. I think Kenna had her hand up next.
Yeah, I think kind of these questions of, it seems like we're focusing in on this, you know, like which option should we choose, A, B, or C? And it's possible that before we try to look at those, we should go back to your purpose of how the framework should be used and try to kind of hone in on that, because I hear that you're looking at it from a community perspective, and Sarah Gurney's looking at it from a local government perspective. And then, you know, there's the argument of aligning with RCPA, you know, creates a common language and this idea of one Sonoma. So I think if maybe we could even try to go around and try to get a group understanding of, you know, what do we want this document to do? It's our document, you know, that's part of the reason that we moved from a climate action plan of being something with prescribed elements to the climate action framework, which we have more freedom to kind of decide, you know, what is it that we want? What is it we want to do? And if it feels like if we could get to that answer today, then, or at least closer to that answer today, then that's going to give you more guidance moving forward than almost anything else we could do in a discussion at this point. So I'll just start with my statement that I don't really know. Like, I don't really know how, for instance, how much engagement Petaluma got outside of the group of climate activists and the group of local government. I don't really know how these frameworks can be used. For me, it's helpful as a organizing principle for this committee and for the work that we're doing of what we bring forward and how we're measuring our success. But I would love to hear other perspectives on, you know, what this kind of document could do for our community and what purposes we see it fulfilling.
Josh.
Yeah, at this point, I'm echoing and agreeing with the last couple of comments, just that question of how the framework will be used seems to me to be a pivotal question that definitely should inform the choice of the format of the larger document. So for me, the question of how the Planning Commission is going to use the climate action framework, or how it's going to relate to their work, how the City Council is going to use the climate action framework, how Public Works is going to approach the climate action framework, how the school district, ultimately relates to the climate framework in some fashion. And so in that sense, it feels to me like relating it to the RCPA Sonoma Climate Mobilization makes sense in the same way that it should relate to the general plan in some fashion. And obviously, I don't know enough about the subject to be too specific about it at this point, but we want a document that's usable, that's actionable, and that each of those working groups has a way to interface with. It's not going to be too different from their usual process or the other documents that they're supposed to interface with within their scope. And so to my mind, that question of how the framework will be used is not something we as a committee can entirely answer. That's sort of the city agencies and actors that would be referring to the framework should also sort of weigh in on how they would want to interface with it. Obviously, that gets pretty complicated. There's also a temptation with a document like this to say, let's put everything in it. Let's make it a total wish list. And some of that can be in the goals and the aspirational stuff, but we also want it to have legs and have a way for the rubber to meet the ground, or you know what I'm saying, some way for it to really be implementable in an immediate fashion. So Phoebe, you mentioned something along the lines of having the general framework with the goals, but also plugging in some more local actions in there. And on the sense of, mitigation versus adaptation, we're going to need them all. It's not an either or equation. We're going to have to do everything we can in one way or another. So all of those lenses need to apply. And that feels like plenty for me to say for now. Thanks so much for the work on the island so far. Look forward to digging in more.
Thank you, Joshua. Jerry?
Yeah, I'll just come back and Ken, I disagree with you a little bit. And I actually agree more with what Joshua said and what Sarah said. I'll go back again. The document, when it's completed, if it's a working document that the city can use, that's where it is actually used. The goals, the community all agrees to, but the city now has to act on that. Departments have to act on it. The Planning Commission, when it makes a determination, staff comes in with a list of things from the general plan and says, it supports this project, or it goes against this project because, and then the statements are there. So the goal portion that you see in the general plan is what the city, with the community is looking at, saying, yeah, do we all agree those are the goals we want to get to? The policies and then the actions are, how are we getting those? The actions change fairly frequently. The policies change less frequently because we'll see different things. As far as Woody's point, as far as adaptation versus mitigation, when we did Sunnyvale's plan, we absolutely had zero adaptation. But we developed that in 2010 through 2013. We're 8 years past that. And in those 8 years, we're realizing adaptation is something that we have to take on in our city. We've seen it in this city already with 8 feet worth of water downtown, 3 years ago. So adaptation has to be part of the definition as well. But I would still reinforce looking at general plans and saying, I want a structure like that because that's how we manage our cities. And that's the reason the state has the management established that way too. It's codified in state law that to be incorporated city, you need to maintain those plans in a particular format and update them every 20 years. And that's it, so that everybody can operate against them. So I find that the best way to do it. And I took longer than I wanted to saying that too. But.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Does anyone else have a sort of response to Kenna's question about how the framework or what the framework should accomplish? And Sunal, you still have your hand up. I'm not sure if it's a new hand or no. Okay, Kathy.
Yeah, having worked on the general plan and seeing how it's implemented through the city, through its actions, I really think that is a good way to go because it as he said, it becomes part of the decisions we make to refer to these goals and to see if, say, a housing project implements these within their design. So I think working with the framework that we have and letting city staff use it that way is a good way to go, rather than create something that doesn't relate to all those segments and ideas and categories. So it's like recreating a wheel. So I'm agreeing with Jerry very much.
Anyone else? Oh, Kenna, not Kenna.
Yeah, it sounds like from who's speaking up, and it would, Tanya, I know you're not a member of the committee, but it would be great to have your voice in this conversation as well, because I know you've given a lot of thought to, what these documents can do and how they fulfill roles in our different communities and at different levels. But what I'm hearing from the group so far is a strong argument in favor of really seeing this document as an internal city government document in many ways, not exclusively, but that would be its primary purpose, and not trying to kind of dual purpose it as a large public engagement type of document. Am I correct in hearing that or not?
Can I weigh in here?
Yeah, sorry, Phoebe, I'm just
someone in charge.
Phoebe to call on speakers.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I'm from the city council's perspective, just a useful document that the city council and specific departments could refer to in making decisions, procedures, policies, specific decisions would be excellent. The modification I would make, Kenna, to what you just described is, the general plan the public looks to also. So I think we can have a document here that really focuses on it being a pragmatic tool for the city, and have that also be a really effective public messaging tool. Just saying.
Sarah?
Thank you, Phoebe. I didn't mean by my comments to cut out the public engagement part. I agree. Diana did a good summary of what I was thinking and said it better than I did. I think it's important too to recall that the council works at the pleasure of the community. So our community values are really, really important to us. And we have a community that is not just a brain trust, but an activist trust, and has so many different sectors to it that it's important to me as an elected to make sure they have a chance to weigh in and then determine the values. I mean, are we more in favor of 3-story buildings or 8-story buildings, that kind of thing, when it comes down to the nitty gritty. So I hope, Phoebe, there's a way to keep the public engagement part lively.
Sunal?
I guess nothing to add, just to everything Diana and Sarah said. I third.
Okay, great. Jerry?
Yeah, I tried to jump in while Ken was making her point that the technical problems, my mouse wouldn't go where I wanted it to go. So if you structure it the way the general plan is, you would end up having an action, for instance, Kenneth, and that action would say, we'll have a report once every 2 years or once a year that outlines how we've done so far. And maybe there's another action that says, we'll have these meetings so that we can get input from the community. And that actually becomes part of the actions that are supporting the policies and supporting the goals. So it's not one or the other. It's the structure allows you to do those things. And in fact, it actually tells you you must do those things and establishes that as part of the framework.
Jasenia?
I kind of just don't understand why we would be the ones taking on this when it's something that would be used within the city government. And I understand that we are a part of it, but in my opinion, we are more oriented towards helping the community. And this feels just a way of holding ourselves accountable, whereas to me, the climate action framework should actually address the community and benefit them and mitigate issues that they're experiencing from the climate emergency, not just make sure that we care about it, I guess. I don't know.
Joshua?
Yeah, thanks. Just to agree with a lot of folks so far who have said that I don't think having an actionable government document replaces public input, that at the very least, there's an obligation as we're compiling this document to actively look for input and vetting of the different sections. That said, sort of deciding on a format that's going to be applicable and really usable for the government agencies that are part of it seems really important, and including as Jerry suggested, that there will continue to be public input sought as a value for further development decisions and whatnot. I mean, this committee was constituted to help the city figure out its best plans and strategies for how to improve things moving forward with all the climate issues going on. And so I feel like this document becomes a central part of that. But certainly in a large way, we're trying to facilitate the input of a broader range of public, and just be sure that folks are included in the thinking that goes into making a working document, which this will be. Thanks again.
Thank you. Deborah? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I forget to unmute. So I do agree with what Sarah and Diana are saying, and I think someone made this point that sticks with me a little bit earlier that I'd like to reiterate, which was, to put all this time into this document and not have it be utilized to its full potential and capacity. So I think that top-down approach really helps us get the utilization and the strategy behind the document that you're making and put it into action, as opposed to be not actually being used.
Okay, and by top-down approach, what do you mean by that?
By the city council being able to, a lot of things that I've seen that work since I've been involved is, there are different stages of how things have to go through to be able to get. I mean, if you want to put an Instagram post on, you have to go through 50,000 people to get, so it's by this being a guidepost for the city council to use, we're going directly to the top. They'll be able to implement it and use it and actually have benefit from all the work that you're doing, as opposed to spreading it out to all these other places that may or may not even be able to implement a lot of the things on the plan.
Okay, so you're saying sort of the main user, which should be the city council rather than all the different departments?
I think the different departments, but I think that the different departments should use it too, but the city council has more of an opportunity to be able to implement than some of the different departments. So I'm not saying it should be exclusive, but we want it to actually be able to be fruitful. We want it to be used. We want it to, carry benefits. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess it goes back to what was said as well. Like, what is our goal? What do we want this to do? Like, I think this guidepost should be something that we're actually getting action on, that we're using, that is giving, that is giving the framework of what we can do to make change. And I see a lot of the committees might not be able to implement that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I think
I guess it goes back to what you're asking them in. I mean, maybe when we flesh out the plan a little bit more and we see what it actually includes in the details, we'll know, who would have the capacity to be able to implement it.
Diana.
Yeah, I was just hoping that we could at some point here get Tanya's input on this question.
Sure. So first, I think this has been a great discussion and a very important one in terms of how the framework is to be used. And I think ultimately it's really, up to all of you as a committee to, based on your, knowledge of the city and the community to figure out what's the best approach that's really going to get action. Because I think that's certainly a common theme that I'm hearing, that we don't want this to be yet another plan or framework that doesn't move forward. I agree that the community engagement piece is very important. And I think, in fact, this framework could be really helpful in terms of kind of building that community will and support that the city council and the staff will need, because there are some very challenging actions that need to be taken if we are to meet our goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. There's a lot of work that we need to do, and some of that will require some tough decisions. And the more we can, through this process, you can educate and inform the community and get the community's input and support, I think the more successful that you'll be in moving those things forward. So yeah, those are a few of my thoughts. I would, in terms of the structure of the document, I would certainly be in favor of having it be, as Phoebe had recommended, kind of a simple structure, either the mobilization strategy or the option B. I think the benefit of considering the mobilization kind of organization is that you can then build off of future work that the RCPA does, and it might simplify your messaging and work with the community if you can show how those things are really connected and leverage any work or communication that the RCPA does around those items. So those are a couple of thoughts. I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah, thank you, Tanya. And I would just add again that I don't think the kind of two structure options are mutually exclusive. I think we can either way identify how actions fall into the other category. So if we went with the sector specific, we could still identify these are the actions that relate to adaptation, these are the ones that relate to mitigation, and vice versa. So just bringing that up again. Kenna?
I just wanted to say that we are kind of running out of the time that we should probably spend on this today. But since I feel like there's a start to some good discussion, but there's probably still more questions that Phoebe needs answered a little more fully or needs more discussion around in order to drive her work to be productive and what we want. So my suggestion would be, since we're canceling our next meeting, that we all, participate in some discussion outside of the meeting. And so it can't be discussion, but Phoebe could send out a survey that we all answer, so that we are not discussing with each other outside of the meeting, and she could present the results to that at our next scheduled meeting in early December. And it might help further develop this outline in the meantime. So that would be my suggestion, because it feels like we could probably talk about this quite a bit. I don't want our canceling a meeting to slow down the work of the framework, but also life is happening all around us, so meetings get canceled. So I don't know if that would be helpful to you, Phoebe, or not, but I suspect that most people in the group would be willing to put some time into things like, what is everybody's vision and goals for this document, and write them out. And then you could do a kind of qualitative analysis of what are the themes that come out of each committee member's proposed vision and goals for the document, to see what the consensus is. And I will see to Kathy.
My question is, I'm looking at the document and seeing option A, B, and C, and there's some underscored links that if we all looked at some of those, we'd have a better understanding of what each one accomplished and how that might relate to how our city works. And we might see that twofold nature, or it might, it just give us a springboard for the conversations that we're having. At least I'm going to look at them.
And then Alex, and then if Phoebe, oh, sorry, Joshua, Alex, then Joshua, and then Phoebe, if you have any kind of wrap up statement, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just my comments on the framework. I mean, the way I see it, to Jasenia's kind of comment, I think we, in some ways, we're branching between community and the city, right? And I think that's part of our goal. So I think there's some responsibilities on both sides, and I think some of the groups may lean towards the community, and some may lean towards giving the city their input. But I think, I'm sure there's some debate about either one. But that's just my perspective. And I think the way I see the framework is also to support us in having measurable goals and an outline for how we see success as a group. And maybe that is, or maybe that isn't what the framework is, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Just so it's always important as we move through groups like these and as they mature, that we have measurable goals, and we obviously have those clear buckets of transportation or energy. And so it's like, well, what are the actionable things that we want to work on, and we want to see as at the end result, say of by the mid 2022 or the end of 2022, or what thing do we want to start working on that we're going to see a result on in X or Y. So just setting those parameters, and I think having the framework kind of helps tie some of those together, at least the way I see it. So.
Yeah, Joshua.
Yeah, just a suggestion that Phoebe be able to get input from people like the Planning Commission and the City Council as well. One format which might be time consuming would be to present at their meetings, but perhaps another format, if it's acceptable, is just to share that sort of hypothetical survey that Kenna mentioned, where you kind of open the floor for people's suggestions and on the options. But that if we're putting an input on that also the government departments or groups that would be interacting with the framework also get to weigh in a little bit before the structure of it is entirely confirmed.
Yeah, and I was also wondering, would it be like acceptable for me to meet with all of the working groups separately to discuss that, or does that violate some meeting?
As long as you don't talk about what happened in the other working group.
Okay.
Right? Like if you say, well, you go to transportation and say, well, energy wanted this. They have to be independent meetings that aren't sharing information. I see
Okay.
John nodding like I got it right.
I didn't realize that somebody who's not on the committee can't say something, because I don't think that I've never seen that in the Brown Act, that somebody who's not part of it can't say something. You can't do it, but it probably would be a good policy though, in any case.
I'll defer to John to weigh in on that.
That I'm not sure. I'll have to double check with Carrie on that one, but I'm not too sure.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Woody.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just jumping in. I mean, the Brown Act applies to elected officials, so it's not doesn't bind public members of the public.
Right, elected and appointed.
I think though, since I am sort of an adjunct to staff, I think it does apply to staff as well. So I'll be sure not to talk about it with the other working groups, but I would love to schedule a meeting with each of them and get to know you all better and talk about the framework some more.
I would also just keep in mind that a lot of us overlap in our working groups, so just be mindful of that.
Yep, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the discussion today. This has been very helpful.
Oh, good. So moving on to working group reports. Alex, your hand is up, but I think that's old. Okay.
Yep.
I really wanted to get to the outreach PR proposal and would love to hear an update from Energy if they have anything, but let's start with the outreach education group. Yes, go ahead, Deborah.
So I just want to say that I unfortunately have to leave early today. I was hoping we got to this piece before that, but I have, it might be something, I don't know how Alex or, how they feel about it, but since you're running out of time and want to work on something else, I have expanded the proposal quite a lot, Alex, if you want to, kind of talk about it and some other kind of ways in which we can work together. We might want to, in an effort of time, either way, but table this. Yeah, and I think it's more than PR. It's like us trying to understand. Again, it's like the framework, putting together the framework for how we can get get conversation going on what Climate Action Committee is, what we do, how to get people involved, how to get the word out, how to spread the word when we have events happening. So Alex, does that feel okay to you to maybe you and I could talk a little bit and yeah, because I've also had some okay, that sounds great then. If you want to email me directly, I have about 20 more pages that we can go over and not waste the committee time.
Yeah, I think, my thought is, once we have a little more polished version, it might be worth having an agenda item so we have a little more time, maybe like 15 or 20 minutes, so we can connect with Ken and Joshua to set that up. But it seems like it might be a little more relevant, especially when we have maybe like a process to share about how we get PR out from the individual groups.
Yeah. And yeah, you and I talk then. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry I have to leave early today, but I will talk to y'all soon.
So we'll pencil that in for the December 8th agenda.
Yeah, I have it as long as you have time before then, Alex. I have everything all. Okay, great. Perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, so now I'm feeling a little bad for cutting Phoebe's discussion short because I thought that would take more time, but now we have time for any other working groups. I know Energy has been doing a lot. I don't know if anybody has anything in particular you want to say. Joshua, were you making a movement? Yeah, go ahead.
I just recall that in one of these summaries, Woody had offered to maybe talk a little bit about the last larger Sonoma climate mobilization web group meeting, and I'm curious if we have time for that. And he feels like it.
Let's see if any working groups have reports, and then we could.
I can give an update since Lisa's not there, not here today. We had a couple of meetings, several meetings. Steve and I are working on putting together a presentation to bring back to the committee on the REACH codes and an idea on structuring titles within Chapter 15 of our code in order to make green building and energy highlighted and consolidated. I happen to know, having worked on the zoning, that a lot of energy points are actually nested inside of zoning instead of inside of building. And so we were looking at what various codes do. And all we're going to bring back to the committee to start with is, what is a REACH code? What does it mean? What direction might we want to go? And then see how the committee feels about the direction we want to go. And not all the specifics of it will include these points. And that was the part where we got hung up to start with. We're going to have these points that we'll have, as opposed to this structure. So we'll have the structure, and then we'll bring back, after we agree that the structure's right, what the points might be. So we're going to have a context in which to discuss that. The other meeting we had was with PG&E that Kenna jumped in on as well, with Andrea Schumer, who is responsible for microgrids and enabling microgrids throughout the PG&E territories. And she gave us an outline of what she's working on, what PG&E is attempting to do, what the challenges have been so far. There has been some issue inside the group. I'm interested in microgrids as enabled by private concerns, but the group seems more interested in doing a coming up with a resiliency project, which would be implemented through government as opposed to through private concerns. So the group's working on that as well. So that's about where we are right now. But a lot of education, and it is complicated stuff.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And this energy group does so much research and work outside of this meeting. You can't believe it. Probably all of you are doing that, but theirs is more visible to me because I ghost their email threads. Diana, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, perhaps this has been addressed, but make sure that the work on microgrids is being coordinated in some way with Phoebe, because I understand that's her second stage focus.
Yeah, we were, and Phoebe's been in all the meetings, including, by the way, if you want to see the video of the meeting that we had, we do have it. Just send a request to me and I'll send you a link to the meeting we had with PG&E. But Phoebe's been included in all those meetings, and she's had to put up with my and Tor butting heads because I see microgrids as a very large solution as part of DER, and Tor sees microgrids as something entirely different. I think the group is going towards the direction that Tor's going.
Thank you.
And Woody?
Thanks. Yeah, I just had a brief report out from the funding financing group, which is myself and Lisa and Steve Pierce also participates on a fairly regular basis in that committee. We met on October 18th. We went through a whole bunch of things, and we are in the process of developing a memo that has some pointers and recommendations, and I'll just give a little teaser that it's going to be it's going to revolve around the current sort of game-changing context at the federal level and the state level, with the state surplus and lots of funding coming in for energy and transportation, clean transportation funding and things like that. And then also at the federal level with the infrastructure bill and federal dollars, you know, of huge proportions coming in for the first time in a long time. We are actually meeting tonight at 6:30. So, you know, hopefully we'll be making some progress on that memo and have something at, you know, a upcoming meeting. So just wanted to share that little update on funding financing.
Great, thank you so much. It's so exciting. It feels like we're getting a lot of traction going. Any other working groups want to report out today? No, okay. So we'll move on to chair reports, and we've already covered the upcoming holidays. We do have our council presentation on December 7th, which is now that we've canceled the next meeting, that we have no meeting before then. So please reach out to me if you'd like to participate in that presentation, and otherwise I will be doing a summary of the progress of the different groups. And please, Diana, weigh in.
I just wanted to suggest that if there's, when the president, it's very, I think it's much more compelling to the city council to have Kenna there in the lead. She's been very effective at that, but to have a second climate action committee member present also. I found that very powerful, and I see the city council members all step up a little closer to listen. So if there's, I would encourage someone here to participate in that effort with Kenna, and she gives a really good structured lead. I don't think it's particularly burdensome to be the second.
Except for waiting for your turn at the council meeting. But I might try to drag Phoebe along if they haven't seen her face yet. So I'll get one of you. Yeah, Joshua's waving. Good. Okay, so then the other item besides that is we still have about 15 minutes. It usually takes us about 2 minutes to get input from members regarding agenda and review of action items. So I would love to cede the floor to Woody for a report out of that larger climate mobilization meeting, if you feel up to it, Woody.
Well, I might feel up to it, but I'm not totally prepared for that. I was prepared at the previous meeting. I had my notes in front of me and all that stuff. For folks that don't know, so this is I think of it as a federation. It's unfortunately got the same-ish kind of name as the RCPA's climate mobilization. So there's some confusion there, and hopefully that can be, maybe someone can change their name. I don't know. Anyway, it's a climate emergency mobilization grouping of the representatives from cities, climate action committees like ours. So I was there. Sonali was also there. Was there someone else, anyone else on the committee, at least one of them? Because now that I think there have been 2 meetings. Oh, Kenna. Oh, Joshua. Okay, yeah. I'm just not remembering. Y'all were there.
Is this Pete's group that you're talking about? I just wanted...
Pete's group. Yeah, it would. You could characterize it as Pete's group. So the group that's the Federation of Climate Action Committees, and for cities that don't have one, representatives from like climate action groups and stuff. So, and just Sonoma County wide. And substance-wise, the first one was, a lot of transportation focus. They actually talked about the gas station issue and gas station prohibitions a lot. So there was a lot of discussion around that, and I'm really hoping that anyone else that was there at any of them can talk a little bit more about what was discussed, because really it's been a while and I don't have my notes in front of me. Anybody? Anyway, I mean, that's what it is. And I've actually been wondering when the next meeting is. I will take a quick look here of this thing, and I'll probably miss it if it's in November, because I leave on Friday for the East Coast. Yeah, I don't even know when the next one is. So anyway, I'll try to keep people apprised once I get back dialed in. Sorry, I don't have a better report.
That's really okay. Just to clarify for everyone that we did talk to city attorney about participation in this group, and I think we clarified that before, but in case any of you were confused, it is fine for everyone on this group to join that group if you want to, because it is an open meet. They do have open meetings. They're open to everyone. So there's nothing behind closed doors happening. So I think so far most people have said they're getting the invitations to those. If you're not getting the invitations, you could let Joshua and me know, and we're happy to send those on when they do come out, to make sure that everybody that wants to participate has a chance to participate.
And I just noticed that Zeno just reminded us and popped into the chat that there is a discussion thread thing on the Slack platform. And so the link is there. Thank you, Zeno.
Yeah, that's great. Because I knew there was talk about Slack, but somehow I never got on it. So we'll all have to become young and hip and learn Slack. All right, so we'll move on to input from members regarding next meeting agenda. What I have so far is for that 12, I believe it's 12/8 meeting, we will put the outreach working groups PR proposal for a full slot of time. Is there anyone else that would like time at our next meeting? And Joshua, please weigh in if there's something that we already have promised an agenda slot to that I'm forgetting. Go ahead, Phoebe.
Yeah, I'd like to talk more about the engagement strategy for the framework at the next meeting.
Great. Anyone else? Well, I think those 2 things are a great match for each other, and we can have a really productive conversation at our next meeting. And in the meantime, I believe Phoebe will be reaching out in one way or another to everyone for input around, how to move this framework continue moving this framework forward. And I will be reaching out around making sure that I am getting it right for how your working groups progress and will be presented to City Council. And astoundingly, it appears that we are ending early unless someone has something to say. And you know what? I realized I have been really, really behind in soliciting public comment during this meeting, and I'm running a slight fever. So, and that's my excuse. But I'd like to take this moment to ask if there's any members of the public that have anything to say about anything we've covered, or anything moving forward that you'd like us to hear. All right, so not hearing anything. Joshua, you want to review our action items?
Sure. So this is mostly general recommendations for homework for folks who are not necessarily committed to the next meeting agenda just yet. So a recommendation to refer to the Urban Land Institute report on land use practices and various ways of approaching wildfire and resiliency. Recommendation kind of to everybody that we refer to some of the resources that Phoebe is referencing as potential models for formatting the climate action framework, most notably including RCPA's climate mobilization strategy, if you haven't read it yet, potentially some of the other city caps or frameworks that were also referenced there. And I'm sorry, Phoebe, I'm not sure if you necessarily agreed that you would create this survey on that subject. We sort of discussed that, but I don't want to list that as an action item unless you feel like that's something both productive and feasible that you could kind of send to us and potentially others.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to committee members one way or another, whether it's coming to working group meetings or doing a survey or some other way to collect information.
Okay, great, thanks. Just didn't want to commit you without you agreeing. And then, yeah, just then a reminder that we will not be having our next scheduled meeting on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving for obvious and pleasant reasons, but that would be a good time to be emailing Kenna either suggestions for the City Council presentation on December 7th, which will be before our next meeting, or for any additional agenda items. So we do still have a few weeks to put that next committee agenda together. So if anybody comes up with more things in their working group, feel free to try to jump on the bandwagon for our next meeting agenda on December 8th. I think that's it.
Great, thank you so much. So this meeting will be adjourned until our next scheduled meeting on December 8th. And thank you all for coming. And Joshua and I usually stay on and chat with you or Carrie for just a couple minutes after the recording. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for all your work.
Thanks all.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
So, John, is there, I'll let you stop the recording.